Good morning, everybody. Can you try to find your seats? We want to start on time in a few minutes. We're expecting a pretty full attendance, so maybe you can make sure that you move into the middle of the rows so everybody can find a seat. That's what he said, Ken. Yeah. Chris Lee's speech, but I don't think there's anything after Chris. So.
No. Well, let's get squared away.
So they have some local style.
Yeah. We just have some logistical confusion about when they think they're coming on.
Okay.
Aloha! Welcome to Ocean Obs 19. My name's Eric Lindstrom from NASA headquarters, one of your sponsors, along with Martin Visbeck and Weidong Yu. And I think I better turn it over to Martin about the introduction.
No,
here.
I think Chris comes up now. And
Chris?
here we go.
So our first speaker here will be Representative Chris Lee from the Hawaii State. No. We've had serious confusion here.
It's all right. We're going to have the Hawaiian opening.
Okay.
And he's the ceremonial master.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
We're good?
Hi, I'm here to just announce that we're going to do an opening traditional ceremony by the Native Hawaiians and a gift exchange. While cell phone pictures are welcome, cell phone ringers and buzzers are not. So if you could please adjust, and we'll allow the ceremony to start.
O a ke anohi a papahana moku, hana o Hawaii he moku, hana o Maui he moku. O a ke anohi a ho o hoku kalani, hana o Molaka I he moku, hana o lana I ka ule he moku. Lili o pupuna lu o papaya ho o hoku kalani, ho I ho o papa nohi a wa kea. Hana o ahu he moku, hana o Kauai he moku, hana o ni I hau he moku. He ula o ka ho o lave. O a ke anohi a papahana moku, hana o Hawaii he moku, hana o Maui he moku. O a ke anohi a ho hoku kalani, hana o Molaka I he moku, hana o lana I ka ule he moku. Lili o pupuna lu o papaya ho hoku kalani, ho I ho o papa nohi a wa kea. Hana o ahu he moku, hana o Kauai he moku, hana o ni I hau he moku. He ula o ka ho o lave. O wa ke anohi a papahana moku, hana o Hawaii he moku, hana o Maui he moku. O wa ke anohi a ho hoku kalani, hana o Molaka I he moku, hana o lana I ka ule he moku. Lili o pupuna lu o papaya ho hoku kalani, ho I ho o papa nohi a wa kea. Hana o ahu he moku, hana o Kauai he moku, hana o ni I hau he moku. He ula o ka ho o lave.
E Hawaii moko ke ai weka ki a kalai puka mai la e aiala o maui noho no pi ilani nui a kamakaulana no e hale a kāla. Puka mai la ki a kana loa 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 kalai hano hano ki ala I tahi. Hiki a kola no ilana I kaula la o ku a ela ke aloha o pu upehe. Ui ke kapu ma moloka I o moloka I la I te puli o. E o aho ke ono o ka kui he wa kui wale a kāla I tālani hāli a kanani mā kaua I o mano kalani pō mano ke oni a no hili. Pili mai lao ni ia o ka ina ka hele lani ka ina I uhia ta pūpū e. A makua lani huna ka mana ona ka mole o lewe hua mā le hua ka lai nā puana e. Aloha e, no kupuna no te pai aina Hawaii a kea. Aloha e.
Aloha mai kākou. Aloha, and yes, welcome. Please be seated for this moment. My name is Kalani Kiocho. I come from Hilo on the island of Hawaii, and I have the privilege, honor, and right as a Native Hawaiian to welcome you here with my colleagues, with my hoa, to Hawaii and this conference. The mele that we shared with you is a mele ko'i honua, a genealogical chant, a recitation of the birthings of the Hawaiian archipelago, and its connection to the Native Hawaiian people. And in this chant, we acknowledge our people, our spaces, our places here and beyond, so welcome. And we'd like to share with you this opportunity to engage with our indigenous brothers and sisters beyond our shores. So I'd like to welcome Kitty Simmons to the stage to interpret what you're about to witness. Mahalo.
So what we are going to be witnessing today is a tradition. We are going to witness a gift exchange. On behalf of the Canadian Indigenous delegation, we have Chief Moses Martin, who is a chief within the Chalnoth Band from the Pacific coast of Canada, and he is presenting a paddle, a traditional paddle that was carved in the traditional lands. It's a symbol of life, and it is also an acknowledgement of the connection we have through water, which is really important for us for travel. And on behalf of the Native Hawaiians, we have Kitty Simons, who's the Executive Director of the Western Pacific Management Council. She's been there for 8 years. She has Maili that she will be presenting, which is a representation of a scent of the living and a scent of the past. So if you please bear witness to this gift exchange, which is necessary before we conduct our regular business.
E tiro, tiro, tiro. E tiro, tiro. E tiro, yeah. O ea mai la pai ki o neo mai ka mau inu ea kama mai ka u ka moku aloa e ki kula ka mao mao. E o mai ko la haina na ta aina ali e he aina nani hana laua ki pahulu. E o mai ke ki he ka meo e ke ala ali e ulu vehi vehi ke ki ha e ke o ne hulani no kana ha. He aku ke kai o kana loa ke ola ku kila kila kau i ka hano hana hana bali ke a malama lama ka maa ono ka halawai me ka ohu ohu i au. No mau inu e ka maki ka māloha aina hoa i ka lama kua aho o mālama lama. Mālama i e ka i ke kūpuna ka pō kua e la kia kua ka naka kali kukui. E o e koe no na kua kau i ka mehe o nā kupuna ama kukui uloa e ka ike o loko ulama hi hi mai kahi pai a mau inu i ka hea hui mai ko i kai. E o hawa i pai aina e ho o paa e ka wā a i ke ala pupuna pāna hei nahi mai la ka makani ki kai mali e. Mo ane mai ki ana ona ka lei aloha. He lei aloha no i aloha e.
I am very honored and proud to be a part of the Canadian delegation in this forum. I'm very proud to present this paddle on behalf of our Canadian delegation because this is something that we've always done throughout our lives for thousands of years. When we approached another nation's shores, we were asked to stay offshore until we were given permission to come ashore and do the business. So this is what we're doing. We're something that, like I said, we've always done for thousands of years, to come with something to honor the people that whose lands that we're coming to visit.
Mahalo nui loa, Moses, Hawaii and the U.S. Pacific Islands and the other islands of the Pacific. Welcome you all, and like you, we are very, very happy to be here, that we can join together with our indigenous people and our scientists to see a way forward so that we will be able to live on this earth as long as we can. Thank you. So can you hold this?
This is our gift to be here. This is our gift to the Hawaiians and the Canadian native, the indigenous people from our chiefs in the islands. These ropes, they come from different fibers of the coconut, and they're woven together. So it represents all of us in different fibers. Together, we lash our canoes with these ropes. Thank you.
E kia kua nui a kua i kia kua poko a kua loa e vehi kalani, vehea. Kauhola kalani, kauhola ia. Vāwahi kalani, vāwahia. E kūlani ha ko i kau mai la e luna e hu. Aua mai la ua, kupu mai la kupu, a mu o mai la mu o, a liko mai la liko, a lau mai la lau. A la la mai la la la, kumu mai la kumu a kumu paahina ore. E holu mai a mulu mai la e. Ahe leo vale no e.
Thank you to the organizers for allowing us to conduct this ceremony, and thank you all for bearing witness to this honoring of spirit and nations.
Thank you very much. That was a wonderful way to start this meeting. I welcome you all here to Honolulu and hope you enjoy the week. Remember that we start at 8:30 sharp every morning after this. The mornings are tightly scheduled and you get a little bit more freedom in the afternoon. My name is Eric Lindstrom from NASA headquarters, the lead sponsor for the Americas. I'm joined by Martin Visbeck, the lead sponsor for Europe and Africa, and Wei Dong Yu, the lead sponsor for Asia and Oceania. We've worked hard to bring you a good meeting and had the program committee and many other people, staff involved who you will meet during the week. So thank them for all their hard work. And let me pass this to Martin for a few words.
Well, welcome also from my side. It's really exciting to be back after 10 years with the Ocean Orbs community. I'm looking forward for a week of celebration of the wonderful successes we had over the last decade, a week of deliberation for our ambitions, for the plans, for the future. I'm so excited to see new people, new faces, new community joining us. And I also wanted to thank very much to the local people from Hawaii, many people who made this happening, and what a wonderful opening we just had. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Wei Dong. Aloha. It's my pleasure to support this meeting. So it is my great pleasure to see the increasing momentum and active participants in this meeting. So this is exactly what we are expecting. So collecting the momentum and the confidence for the future. So I think starting from now to the next decades, we will continue this momentum, working together for the better future. Thank you.
Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Representative Chris Lee from the Hawaii State House, District 51. Chris Lee's successfully led the campaign to expand the Papahanaumoku Akea Marine National Monument into one of the world's largest marine protected areas. He is a supporter of addressing climate change and has authored laws making Hawaii the first state to mandate 100% renewable energy by 2045, the first state to commit to economy-wide carbon neutrality by 2045, and the first state requiring all public schools and universities to upgrade and become net zero facilities by 2035. This is the kind of leadership we all should try to accomplish in our lives. It's with a great honor that I introduce Chris Lee.
Aloha, everybody. Aloha, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here this morning. I must first disclose, these things that we've accomplished here that we're talking about, that we just heard about, that was not just me. That was our government, our counties, our institutions, our private sector stakeholders, most of all our community coming together to make those things possible. I think that's a common refrain that here in Hawaii we really emphasize, because no one can do it alone. No one. In coming here today, it's really perfect timing, because I spent the weekend at Kailua Beach, which is over the mountains, maybe about a 20-minute drive that way, in a place where I grew up. And my sister has a 2.5-year-old now who loves the beach, loves sand, loves the ocean, loves getting it everywhere and eating it and everything else, just like I did back when I was young. And it really brought home what this place is, what our ecosystems in our nearshore marine environment, what our oceans provide for us. And it's something that, growing up, I didn't have the same perspective on, because I grew up in that same area at a time when we didn't know the value of what we had. I would go out onto the reef with friends in high school and collect reef fish, put them in our aquariums. I had like 250 gallons of aquariums in my house, which my parents absolutely were thrilled that I finally got rid of when I went off to college. But the way we took, today we would look back on and say was not the right way. We would take coral, we would take fish, we would do things that we didn't know better for. There was no one telling us how to sustainably interact with our environment. There was no one telling us and showing us data over what is sustainable for the future. We just took. But I'm really glad that today I have an opportunity to help write some of that past in a way that brings everyone to the table and educates in a way that our generation never had heard. In the same way today that our governments around the world, our private sector, our partners, our communities often don't know the impacts of what's occurring out in our oceans. We don't know, we don't have enough data at times that is tangible and real and digestible to the average person, certainly to policymakers. And I speak for myself, but I think I can affirmatively say that many of my colleagues in governments around the world that I interact with don't have data, and without that, it's easy to turn a blind eye to some of the biggest pressing problems that we face, because they're difficult problems to solve. So focus on something else. We have an opportunity, though, to really change that, to monetize, to put into terms that people understand out in the public what is happening, what needs to happen, the things that are important to us and how to protect them, how to ensure we have sustainable fisheries and species and an ecosystem that can survive us and survive this coming century. But the time is short. We know, and I'm certainly not one to articulate to all of you, the kinds of issues we have when it comes to plastics in our oceans, when it comes to pollution, when it comes to ocean acidification and climate change, and what that's going to do to our oceans in the decades to come. In Hawaii here, we already know that in any beach, sadly, even the one I was on with my niece yesterday, you can sift through the sand and find handfuls of microplastics. There's no avoiding it. I was just in Vanuatu, been across the South Pacific, and it's the same story nearly everywhere. In Hawaii, our nearshore oceans have become so acidic over the last few decades that our reefs are clearly being impacted. With warming out there today, this year we're expecting a record coral bleaching, from which many reefs around the state may not recover, and by which, over the next few decades, as we approach mid-century, we're expecting to lose most of our reefs here in our state. These things are real, which is why it's so fortunate to see leaders start to change their tune, start to come to the table and say, you know what, when it comes to all these issues, whether it's pollutants or climate or anything else, we're going to do something about it. It's great to see nations step up to the plate in Paris and with the climate accords that nearly every nation on the planet is committed to, and which subnational governments, even here in the United States, have not only said we need to do something about, not just for our climate, but for our oceans, for our entire planet, but we're going to do something. And on top of that, we're going to go even further. And while Hawaii was the first, there are now a series of states in the United States that have stepped up and said, we're moving toward 100% clean energy, we're reducing emissions to zero within the next 25 years. And here in this state, it's really exciting because we are expected not only to hit that target, which is legally required, but we're going to exceed it by probably 5 or 10 years. And if we can do that here, and if we can sell that story elsewhere, then we can all do it anywhere. And that's really what this is all about, because we can't do this alone. As much as we value our oceans here in the Pacific, it's one world we live in. And as everyone knows, our oceans are connected and one giant ecosystem and one giant responsibility for us all. And that's why it's so great to have everyone here in Hawaii today. You know, we can succeed in changing what needs to be changed and protecting what needs to be protected and ensuring continuity for our future generations. We need the data. We need the stories told in a way that the rest of the world can pay attention to. That's why your role here is so very important, because we're on a clock. And as we all know, we have a limited amount of time to solve some of these enormous challenges, not just for us, but for our next generation. And I hope for my niece, when she grows up, the beach that I grew up on, the reefs that I grew up swimming in my community today, that beach is no longer there. It has been eroded away by all sorts of things, including sea level rise. The reefs are no longer alive in that area. And I hope this is not the future that we have to leave our next generation, because we know we can do better, and there are places that are doing it, and that's why we're all here. As policymakers, we cannot change things on our own. We have to convince the public, we have to convince the rest of the planet, the rest of the world, each of our communities from which we come, that we can do something and we are going to do something. But we can't do that without the kinds of observations, data, science, and most of all, stories, firsthand accounts that all of you are so very critical to provide. So I just want to give a huge thank you and mahalo for all of you, not just for coming here this year, but for doing the work you're doing, because that is the only thing that's going to empower the rest of us to step up and together change our future and save this incredible resource which we have here on this planet, which we've not found anywhere else in this universe. So thank you so much for coming out. Thank you for what you're doing. And thank you. Let's work together to make this a better century than the last. Mahalo.
Thank you, Representative Lee. That was wonderful. when we thought about the introduction for this meeting, we thought we would get people who really, truly love the ocean to inspire us at the beginning of this conference. And who better than people who spend days, months, parts of years sailing the ocean. And so I'd like to introduce Dee Kafari. She originally started out as a secondary school physical education teacher and made a decision to change careers in 2000 as the desire for adventure travel and experiencing new environments took hold. So Dee's sailing career has seen her rise through the ranks to become one of the most successful and recognized offshore sailors in a very short space of time. Joining her is Vicky Song, I believe the first Chinese woman to circumnavigate the globe in a sailboat. She did that as an amateur sailor to start and as a reporter to complete the 11-month, 45,000-mile Clipper round-the-world yacht race. And so I'm going to turn over the next 15 minutes to their inspiration. Thank you.
Okay. It's great when a presentation works, isn't it? To some, our oceans are calming, intoxicating, almost therapeutic. To others, the oceans are remote, frightening, and exhilarating. The unmeasurable power, the ferocity, and the hostility. The inviting serenity, the luring comfort and tranquility. All that takes place in our oceans, and they mean very different things to each and every one of us. For me, our oceans are my office and my playground, and I'm privileged to spend as much time as I do there. They're home to nature in its natural environment, the albatross soaring just millimeters above the crest of the Southern Ocean wave, the dolphins playing in the bow wave, the whale that you smell long before you see. The oceans have endless horizons, 360 degrees of dramatic sunrises and sunsets with their mixed hues of burnt oranges and reds. It's a world of extremes, the glassy seas, no wind being becalmed, the huge crested waves that send you soaring down steep slopes on the verge of control, the biting cold and the sweltering heat. The ocean can mean different things, but to each and every one of us, the oceans are a source of food. We're living off the sea as much as we're living off the land. A continuous flow of trade, industry and business relying on continuous movement of both goods and people, and the oceans affect our health. They're our barometer for the health and well-being of our planet. Covering 2/3 of the Earth's surface with so much still unknown and yet to be explored, it provides us with the very air that we breathe. For every 10 breaths, 7 are from the ocean. It regulates our climate, our rains, and our droughts. There are so many ocean indicators that provide information for the condition of our climate that I can't believe there are still people questioning that we should look after them. This is why I feel empowered by an event such as this, bringing together great minds and innovators to collaborate and learn. We need to share the knowledge we have, increase our transfer of knowledge, information, and create the actions to not only protect our oceans, but to help restore our oceans' health.
The ocean, it connects all the continents, and as sailors, we care deeply for our ocean. It is not only our playground, our office, our home, but sometimes everything. Life on the sailboat is very different and limited. The water we drink was purified water from the sea, and the food we only eat is pre-measured. We're sleeping on a bunk that's only 0.5 meters wide, and we're having a shower when it rains. We enjoy the beautiful sea lives along our journeys. The tired bird will rest on the deck, and dolphins and whales come to play with us in the dark night. And in the dark night, The glowing algae will light up the sea, which is just magical. We're deeply aware of the importance of everything that keeps us alive. We learn everything we can about our boat and the ocean around us. It is our life supporting system. We take good care of her, and she takes good care of us. When we step back and look at our Earth, it is just like our boat in the universe. It is our life supporting system for everyone. We are deeply connected to the ocean, and every day we learn a bit more about her. The wind and the waves, the current and the temperatures. We care for any dramatic change of her mood. We are passionate to contribute to absorbing the ocean, because if there's no water, there will be no life. And I wish we could all live in a good harmony along with the ocean.
I've seen firsthand the increase in marine pollution. The macroplastics that are easy to see, the helium balloons, the nets, the crates, the bottles, the food packaging. It's present in all our oceans and not always just close to shore as a result of the ocean currents. But now we understand the breakdown of these plastics to smaller microplastics held in suspension and confused by marine life as food. The result now understood, we are in fact eating our own plastic waste on our dinner plate. We have an amazing industry of competitive sailboat racing and cruising that visits areas of our oceans that most of the scientific community can only dream about getting to. And it's with collaborations that we're now able to make progress. In scientific research, and in my last round the world, we did exactly that. We carried machinery with a collaboration from Geomar and Subsea Tech that not only tested for pH levels, temperatures, PCO2, chlorophyll, salinity, and probably many others that I don't understand, but also through a series of filters, we tested for microplastics. This took place every day, even in some of the most remote places on the planet. As a result, I now have super yacht designers asking if they should design yachts of the future with scientific capabilities. This is groundbreaking, not only the research and the data we got, but this conversation. Now we just have to join the scientific world with the design world to get more boats out there doing this kind of research. We also deployed the drifter buoys for NOAA. This is not new technology, but it transmits data that not only helps the accuracy of forecasting, but helps with the collaboration. We now have joined up thinking and an example of this collaboration. We have microplastic data combined with the ocean currents understanding, and we now get to understand why there are microplastics even in the remotest part of our planet. Point Nemo in the depths of the Southern Ocean has microplastics, but now we understand the currents that have transported these particles there. Data can't be ignored. As Chris Lee mentioned, it's the power that gives convincing argument for policymakers and convincing people to change their minds. But this is base data, what we collected, and what we need to do is build on this. We need a more accurate picture that allows us to understand our progress. Are we winning, or are things getting worse? Are we seeing a decrease? Are we fighting these issues? The media love data. They love facts that they can share with their viewers, and it's a powerful tool. This is powerful for you in this room because the scientific community are now meeting the mainstream public. Using a platform like sport, and sailing in particular, allows for a far greater demographic reach. This will make a difference. My hope is that we can get more research out there with more fleets of yachts to help the understanding and increase the flow of knowledge, thus promoting action for change. Good luck, and thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the conference.
Wow, what a great opening we had. We heard from our Polynesian friends about how important the ocean is to them. We heard from Chris Lee about what it means to policymakers to get ocean information to build a more sustainable future, and what an inspiring testimony of engagement from Dee Kafari and Vicky Sung, representing here the large community of non-experts who want to partake in our adventure in ocean observing, ocean understanding. I have a few slides. They might show up, and if they don't, I'll just talk like that. Here we go. So Ocean Ops has been a conference series where those of us who are working in the ocean, thinking about the ocean, wanting to observe the ocean, get together and share our plans, our ambitions, celebrate our successes. But as we heard this morning, there's also a wider context within which the ocean community can operate. And we have been presented with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, you might say, where just a year and almost 2 years ago, the United Nations General Assembly has declared for a decade of ocean science for sustainable development. This decade will start in 2021, and it will end in 2030. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for this conference to get some ideas, some plans, some ambitions out towards the decade. The decade is not there by accident. It is because of the things that we heard this morning, that the ocean is now becoming more at the forefront of policy. We heard the importance of the ocean for climate. We heard the importance of the ocean for resilient communities, disaster risk reduction. If you live in Hawaii, tsunamis is a word that everybody knows in Hawaii. There's even the tsunami warning system here. It's an ocean that is increasingly asked to support livelihoods, foods, transports for societies, not only who live at the coast, but globally. But it's also an ocean that has seen the pollution, the threats that we just heard some examples of. And against this backdrop, and against the backdrop of a growing population in the world, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was developed, and also has a Goal 14 that looks at the ocean specifically. It's there not just because of the scientists, but it's also there because of small island communities like Hawaii, who basically made the case the future of the ocean is their livelihood, it's their future, we need to look at it, take care of it. The decade has a vision, which I think is not too different from the vision from this conference. Ocean Ops wants to work with the scientific expert community, with the business community, with the governing and governance policy community, but also with civil society to develop the scientific knowledge, the data that we can use to build infrastructure, foster partnerships around the goals for a more sustainable and healthy ocean. So it's a vision of working together, of community. If you look more detailed into the decade, and there will be a couple of breakout sessions during this week where you can do that, but if you look at the research and development priority areas, at least those ones we're discussing right now, almost all of them have some needs for information for observing from the ocean. So this community, this conference will be very influential in setting the stage for what the decade can bring out for the next 10 years. It can showcase, it can tell the stories, share the successes, and point to new needs and ambitions in ocean observing. My last slide is a bit more technical. I've been, over the last couple of years, thinking a little bit about how does ocean observing feature in the topics, in the comments that we heard up to now. And I think Dee basically said it, Chris Lee said it, we need an ocean action plan. We need to understand what we need to change about the ocean. This is the policy community. This is the governments around us. This is the decision makers around us. They want to hear from all of us in the science community what we need to do for the ocean so we can share it for the next generation and around the planet. Now, that ocean action plan needs a decision support system. It needs knowledge from the ocean. And this is where ocean ops come in. We are a community that observes the ocean, that takes that information, puts it into data sets, shares them globally, makes that available to the communities that need that. And that knowledge is, I think, helping the policymakers. But they need other knowledge as well. Legal knowledge, economic knowledge, civil society knowledge, traditional knowledge. But I think Ocean Ops is very well placed in this strategy to develop the data, the information, the observations that inform knowledge. And I think it's that opportunity that makes us so much more relevant than you can imagine. So with that, I now have the pleasure to introduce someone to us who could be here. He's an islander. His name is Ambassador Peter Thompson, who used to come from Fiji. Now, Peter Thompson is maybe known to some of you. He's been very active in the negotiation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. He personally made sure that there would be an ocean goal. He's cleanly advancing the ocean agenda at the UN system, and he is a big fan of our community, and he really, really wanted to be here with us. But duties in the UN in New York called him back. But we have a video address from him, so welcome with me, Peter Thompson, to the video. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, all courtesies observed. Aloha ni mulivinaka and greetings to you all. I very much wish I could have been with you in person today to discuss the subject that is dear to my heart in the beautiful setting of Hawaii. Earlier this month, I was in the South Pacific attending ocean meetings in my hometown of Suva, at SPREP in Apia, and at the Polynesian Parliamentarians Conference in Papeete. But duties at the UN in New York meant I could not make it to Hawaii this time around. We're gathered together at a critical time in humanity's relationship with the ocean. I put the stress on humanity because it is our accumulated activities that are causing the decline in the ocean's health. And it is humanity, not the ocean, that will be the ultimate victim if this decline is not reversed. The decline to which I refer has 5 anthropogenic causes: our harmful fisheries practices, our polluting of the environment, and the 3 greenhouse gas-induced symptoms of deoxygenation, acidification, and warming. I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say to you that we cannot in our lifetimes allow this decline to progress to the drowning of atolls and low-lying coastal lands, to the extinction of coral and a myriad of marine species, or to the cascading alteration of the ocean's ecosystem upon which so many rely for sustenance and security. I've said before that when you're sick, you go to the doctor. And with the ocean's health in trouble, we have to go to the ocean's doctor, by which I mean we go to ocean science and the best of our marine scientists around the world. Of course, a doctor has to observe the symptoms in order to diagnose and prescribe treatment. And it is in this light that we see the existential necessity of scaling up ocean observation in order for the right course to be taken in correcting the decline. Before I leave this medical analogy, let me say that even before we go to the doctor, there are some things we can do to help ourselves right away, like giving up cigarettes and sugar drinks or getting exercise and not headbutting the wall. Likewise with the ocean, we can stop dumping our junk in it. We can stop harmful fisheries. And most importantly, we can immediately cut greenhouse gas emissions by radically changing our consumption and production habits. Ladies and gentlemen, Sustainable Development Goal 14, the ocean goal, requires us to conserve and sustainably use the ocean's resources. Our leaders universally agreed to that noble goal in 2015, and we're working to faithfully implement its 10 targets. Make no mistake, for us to achieve those targets, we have to give more than lip service to sustainability. There are many human practices currently underway or being planned for the ocean which are simply not sustainable. So vigilance is necessary. Similarly, the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, 2021 to 2030. It's a call for action to face the challenges placed upon the ocean by combined climate and human pressures. The decade will set out to define a new and sustainable future for the ocean and the life it supports. Ladies and gentlemen, long-term ocean observations allow us to better understand climate change and variability and improve our forecasting of climate, weather, ocean status, and environmental hazards. Developing our ability to reliably provide this information is central to human resilience. In addition to supporting resilience, better ocean knowledge and information will undoubtedly support prudent development of the sustainable blue economy. In the past 3 decades, the global science community has made steady progress in the development and coordination of ocean observations, thereby allowing our better understanding of the ocean's role in the global climate system, as well as climate's impact upon the ocean. The number and size of regional and national observing systems has been growing. However, it is clear that in order to meet increasing urgent demands, a rapid upscaling of the extent of the ocean observing system is required. The central demand is for a fully integrated global observing system, capturing essential physical, chemical, biological, and ecological ocean properties, with the data produced being freely available for the common benefit of people and planet. It goes without saying that many developing countries will need support and assistance in gaining observing capacity so that they too can contribute to the global good. Ladies and gentlemen, now is the time to act. The need for an expanded global ocean observing system designed to meet the requirements of a broad spread of users is clear and urgent. Without the proposed expansion, we run the risk of basing our resilience and sustainable development on little more than guesswork. This required expansion will be a big challenge for us all, both in terms of resourcing and capacity development. Meeting the challenge will require the scientific community, governments, private sector partners, and the public to recognize the need, embrace the plan, and work together to achieve it. Such broad collaboration with excellent prospects of success is eminently doable, but we have to get on with the job without further delay. It's sobering to think that our ability to undertake this vital exercise would have been very unlikely when the Global Ocean Observing System was first developed in 1991 by the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission. But now, with the system well established and rapidly growing public awareness of the threats posed by climate and ocean change, the world is ready to mobilize action in this field. You have a highly important role this week in Hawaii of shaping thoughts and words into firm plans and decisive action. All of us who care for the health of the ocean applaud your efforts. I thank you for your attention today, and I wish you well in your deliberations. Pinaka.
So thank you, Peter Thompson, to New York. Now we're going to have 3 short presentations getting towards this conference series, the Oceanobs. So I'm going to welcome to the podium Albert Fischer. He's the head of the Ocean Observations and Services section at the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO and director of the Global Ocean Observing System. Albert, you have the floor.
Thank you, Martin. I'll speak to you a little bit about the history and importance of this conference. The history of this conference stretches back to the 1980s and 1990s to 2 important projects, the Tropical Ocean Global Atmosphere Project, TOGA, and the World Ocean Circulation Experiment, WOS, where in fact I had some of my first amazing moments as an ocean observer as a graduate student. These projects both proved that international cooperation could leverage individual contributions and unlock capacity and knowledge that would have been impossible otherwise. Technological leaps in observations grew out of these projects, proving the value of repeat hydrography, of moorings, of profiling floats, and satellite altimetry. Let's remind ourselves a little bit about the political context in the 1990s. In the dialogue between science and politicians, the IPCC's second assessment report said that the balance of evidence suggests a discernible human influence on climate, but that many uncertainties existed, which needed work, amongst other things, on systematic monitoring of ocean characteristics. The report had virtually nothing to say about the influence of climate on ocean ecosystems. So it was in this context that the design of an ocean observing system for climate was developed by 2 expert panels in the 1990s, the Ocean Observing System Development Panel and the Ocean Observations Panel for Climate, using concepts of feasibility and importance or impact to make choices. This work culminated in the Oceanobs 99 conference, the first international conference for the Ocean Observing System for Climate. This conference brought together 300 people in San Rafael, France, supported by 43 peer-reviewed white papers. It was a historical milestone and cemented the foundations of what we now know as a sustained ocean observing system for climate. In the decade following, we made remarkable progress in implementing this vision with the full deployment of a core Argo array, but also surface drifters, repeat hydrography, new satellite missions, and accompanying data infrastructure. During the 2000s, a true ocean forecasting community also developed, assimilating satellite and in-situ data products into real-time forecasts and creating nowcasts, forecasts, and reanalyses. There was a growing understanding of the ocean's role in climate, but also the climate's impact on the ocean. In 2007, the IPCC stated that the warming of the climate system was now unequivocal, and that observational evidence from most oceans shows that many natural systems are being affected by regional climate changes. It spoke for the first time about ocean acidification and its expected negative impacts. Also in the 2000s, a key oceanographic community grew up around the Census of Marine Life. The census had contributions from nearly 3,000 scientists from 80 countries, describing many new species, discovering biodiversity hotspots, and documenting declines in marine life, as well as pockets of resiliency. In 2009, the Oceanobs 09 conference was held in Venice. It brought together 620 participants, supported by 99 peer-reviewed community white papers, and it held out promise that systematic observations of the ocean would be useful not just for climate, but for a growing range of operational purposes and to make a leap in understanding in marine life and ocean health. In this past decade since Oceanobs 09, we've come a good way down that road. We've developed far more systematic approaches using a framework for ocean observing. We've synthesized requirements across climate, operational services, and ocean health, expressed in essential ocean variables. And collectively, we have built up and sustained the in-situ observing networks envisaged 20 years ago at Oceanobs 99 and take advantage of ever-growing satellite observations. We can be proud of these accomplishments. We have embraced new networks and technologies into the observing system and are pushing forward with the development of observing networks for biological and ecosystems essential ocean variables. So here we are at Oceanobs 19, at what I think many speakers have said this morning is a pivotal moment for ocean observations. The world has changed in the last 10 years, and all the speakers this morning have told us that observing the ocean is no longer primarily for ocean science. There's wide acceptance that we are in a new era where human beings are marking our one planet's future. The public is increasingly aware of and concerned about the health of life in the ocean, with plastic pollution being a potent symbol. Youth are influencing public dialogue and action, adding an element of urgency, with examples such as the Wisdom Sisters of Bali campaigning against disposable plastic bags, and Greta Thunberg of Norway sailing across the Atlantic in a zero-carbon voyage to campaign for climate action. The public is aware that we're experiencing greater extremes in weather, greater exposure of vulnerable populations at the coast, and economic losses due to extreme weather and ocean hazards have hit record levels. As populations concentrate on the coast, many countries are also looking to the ocean as a source of economic growth and livelihoods. So governments have responded, and we heard about the collective commitments to the Sustainable Development Goals, to climate action under the Paris Agreement, the Decade for Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, and countries are now negotiating commitments to protect high seas biodiversity and to set new targets in a post-2020 biodiversity framework. More and more, people are looking to the ocean, and depending on our ability to observe it, to understand it, to predict it, and most importantly, to translate that science into actionable information. More and more, we have new and exciting technology to observe the ocean and ways of observing the ocean, but the sustainability of our enterprise is fragile. The funding is not always sustained. It really is a pivotal moment for the ocean observing community. We truly need to build new partnerships to make the ocean observing system responsive and fit for purpose, to generate new advocates for our activity, and to use our collective intelligence to bring society not just knowledge about the oceans, but solutions to global and local problems. So nearly 1,500 of you are with us here today in Honolulu, and 2,480 contributing authors have crafted 128 peer-reviewed and published community white papers. The ocean observing community and their sponsors are ready to speak and are larger than ever. This really is an exciting moment, full of opportunity, and let's take that moment and seize it. Thank you.
Thank you, Albert, for that wonderful summary of where we got in the last 2 decades. Next one is going to be Jan Newton. Jan Newton is part of the OceanObs 19 program committee. She's a senior principal oceanographer with the Applied Physics Laboratory of the University of Washington. Jan also serves as the co-director of the Washington Ocean Acidification Center and fosters connections among researchers, policymakers, industry, and others to address key priorities. Jan, I'd like to welcome you to the stage. There you are, okay, and to introduce to us the opportunities of this conference and the inspiration it gives all of us.
Thank you so much. We are here. Yes, we are here. All 1,500 of you who have traveled here. It has been my honor to be a member of the OceanObs 19 Program Committee, an incredibly dedicated and wonderful group of ocean scientists who have worked really hard to bring us all this far and who fondly welcome each and every one of you. Why are we here? In dedication of understanding the ocean. A truly amazing ocean with single-celled, oxygen-yielding phytoplankton that we can see from space, with an atmosphere that protects us, yet is accumulating our waste. with a base of the food web that can nurture an ecosystem, or, depending on species and conditions, can be deadly to it and us. The ocean provides food to diverse and well-adapted species, including us, though I think we have to ask, is well-adapted an appropriate modifier for us? The ocean has been and is a transportation highway for many people, for many purposes. It has and continues to allow our cultures to persist, to connect, and to prosper. The ocean remains a source of discovery. The importance of the ocean is not lost on us, the community that observes it. We observe the various states and processes of the ocean, its variation, but also its change. We translate the oceans. We translate the oceans. We have that responsibility. If not us, who will? We translate the oceans. It is each and every one of you. This is your Ocean Obs. Here in Honolulu, we have this amazing opportunity, this decadal scale opportunity to come together to define a vision forward. We need innovation to meet information needs. We need stronger integration over many scales, over many disciplines, and we need truly global capacity to embrace both traditional and academic knowledge, to standardize and share best practices, and to work collectively beyond siloed ocean science. We need to further organize and evolve our governance in order to achieve these aims. Our program here at Ocean Obs 19 over this week is set up to lead these concepts for discussion amongst us all. We welcome and invite and implore you to define the vision for Ocean Obs 19, as we did as a community in '99 to achieve global cooperation for ocean observations, as we did in '09 to increase our observing focus to biology, as we aim to do in '19 to continue these efforts and also to examine our link to society, to stakeholders, to users of ocean information. And as we want to do, to set the stage for '29 with new ocean leaders who will think of things we cannot even fathom now. We are so glad you are here. We are so glad you are and have been engaged through numerous community white papers leading up to this day, that you have taken on leadership for numerous breakout sessions. So now, please, everyone, take the responsibility to make these days meaningful, to last far beyond this week, to be something really very special, whereby we know that a better ocean knowledge legacy continued with us. We need you all. This is our opportunity. Mahalo to you all, and mahalo nui loa to the ocean. Thank you.
All right, last but not least, for this particular session, I welcome Eric Lindstrom to the podium. Eric will introduce to us what the legacy will be, can be, should be from this Ocean Obs 19 conference here in Hawaii. Welcome back, Eric. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Martin. I was asked to speak on the legacy of OceanObs 19, so being the nerdy guy I am, I had to look up the word legacy. And legacy is a thing handed down by a predecessor. So I decided to give you a talk breaking that down a little bit. First of all, I'd characterize this OceanObs as a process handed down from decade to decade, and you can see we're successfully growing. For me, it is the collective imagination behind the sustained global observing system. All of your thoughts and plans have come together to bring us this system. So, in terms of the legacy, what is handed down to us? I break it down into 4 things. First is the recognition that we have a global observing system. It's really a legacy of OceanObs 99 when we began growing Argo and other pieces of the system from the technologies of the 80s and 90s. Second, we have guidance on how to work and how to partner in the form of the Framework for Ocean Observing, which is a legacy of OceanObs 09. We have the collection of community white papers with almost 140 papers, more than 2,000 authors. They're conveying the status, plans, potential ways forward for elements of the system. It's a very rich environment of information. And finally, we have a conference, us here to foster conversation and planning between users of ocean observations, the ocean observers themselves, and perhaps most importantly, as an integral part of the OceanObs process, the sponsors of the system. So we've brought together the sponsors and the observers to have a collective discussion about the ways forward. So what legacy will we hand off? I think there are, again, 4 things. First is a renewed commitment to the framework, meaning articulation of your needs in terms of our common language, societal need, fitness for purpose, essential ocean variables, readiness, feasibility, impact. These are common across the planet. As we rally around these topics, we manage to put together plans that can span the global ocean. Second, I think there's a localization of engagement and support for international planning and collective action on ocean observing, meaning the making of good faith attempts to entrain your relevant local ocean observing contributions into the global system through adherence to global plans, GOOS, GEO, other acronyms, and best practices. We'll hear a lot about best practices at this meeting, I hope. Thirdly, expanded partnerships in ocean observing across nations, scientific disciplines, and between ocean observers, users, and sponsoring organizations. And let's not forget dimensions such as platform sharing and specialized communities such as the coastal ocean, tropical and polar communities. The opportunities are many and diverse. Fourth, and one that I'm keenly interested in telling you about briefly, is a living action plan for OceanObs 19 to record, track, and follow up recommendations from the community white papers, the breakout sessions, and the panel discussions. We have staff and infrastructure built for this conference to record and collect recommendations. And through the Living Action Plan, I hope that this conference leads to years of collective specific actions to expand and improve sustained ocean observing. And in order to make that happen, in my opinion, the more that our recommendations record the specifics of who, what, when, where, why, and how information, the higher likelihood of their realization. Some vague words are hard to follow up, but if we know who to track down to get more information, we'll do better. We need to know these sorts of details. After all, that is how your ideas or cause can be taken up by others, and we need to work collectively. But there is no single formula or roadmap for success. There are many different ways that our nations and cultures support ocean observing. However, the framework is based on the fact that we do have successes and lessons learned. Satellite constellations, Argo, drifters, the Tropical Pacific Observing System, Ghost Ship, to name a few of the legacy systems, and seabed mapping, eDNA, GeoBond, and citizen-enabled sampling, to name a few of the newer aspects of the system. You all have the capacity to build more successes. That's why we're gathered here. The true legacy of OceanObs 19 will be told at OceanObs 29. This week, let's become the predecessors our descendants deserve. Thank you. Okay, we have a short video here as we prepare for the next panel. I think you will find this very inspiring, our ocean observations in action.
The ocean really is responsible for life on this planet.
Life is changing in the ocean is going to be very important. There's a number of areas where OceanObs 19 can really be an important springboard.
What problems can we solve?
It's not that easy to protect. We have to conserve it. It's very important.
We have to cooperate.
Bring together stakeholders and scientists.
our job as a community is to integrate those societal concerns with the scientific questions.
If we're going to take care of our ocean and really have a future of an ocean that is healthy and prosperous,
we really will make a big difference.
We translate the ocean.
Wasn't that wonderful? Sherry in the front row here from the Consortium for Ocean Leadership put that together. Stand up, take a bow. That was awesome. So next, I'd like to introduce the moderator of our next session, Connecting to the User Community. And Craig McLean, my dear friend, is the Assistant Administrator for NOAA's Oceanic and Atmospheric Research. I think he's also Acting Chief Scientist of NOAA. And I think he grew a foot taller this last week in defending the National Weather Service in Alabama. He wears many hats as a defender of science, number one, but also leading the execution of so many NOAA programs. He serves as the U.S. representative to the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission and the U.S. representative for the U.S.-European Union Canada Galway Statement on Atlantic Ocean Cooperation. And it's always my pleasure to welcome Craig.
Thank you, Eric, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you for such a very warm response. I would imagine if any of you were in a similar position, you would have done the same thing. I'd like to welcome you here with the inspiration of recognizing many things. First of all, a dynamic organizing committee, and I want to thank Eric, Martin, and Wedong for their leadership, but I would like to ask each of the members of the organizing committee to please stand and be recognized for this outstanding conference that they have put together and to which you thought to come and attend. So could the organizing folks please stand and be recognized and join me in congratulating them? I'm sure you agree with me that it's absolutely fantastic to see each of the succession in Ocean OBS conferences doubling in size. And that shows the increased attention that the world has to this cause and this purpose. I'd also like to recognize the success of having the wonderful presence of the Indigenous Peoples delegation, and thank you all for attending. As we look at our cultures mixing in many lands, we realize that we suffer the fear of dilution of culture, and it's so remarkable to be in a place that is so culturally oriented as the state of Hawaii, and to have the representatives from the Indigenous Peoples delegation here from other parts of the world to remind us that these cultures are great memories of what the earth used to look like, and we could make sure that the value of their observations are sustained as well, and the value of the contribution of Indigenous peoples' record and memories as well. So thank you for being here. If we look at the excitement that everyone has generated in coming here now for the third of these conferences, every 10 years we gather, and every 10 years this community really puts a mark on our understanding of ocean science. There is today a remarkable confluence of interests in the ocean in a very positive way. For those of you who might have been at the UN Ocean Conference or at the Our Ocean conferences annually, you will probably be seeing that what compassionate conservationists had hoped for 20 years ago, we now have commercial sector interests pronouncing their commitment to fulfill these types of objectives. The world is changing because you have done your work. You have inspired people by the knowledge you generate and the observations you make and the technology that you deploy. Because of you, this story is being well told. Governments are paying attention, industry is paying attention, and largely on the shoulders of academic leaders have we been able to advance this understanding. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not alarmists. We are reporting the truth, and it's very important that it be seen to do so. We have an excellent panel for you here today that would describe what those truths are, what we are observing, and what is the value to society that those observations contribute. I think it's going to be a very good discussion. We will invite you shortly to come to the microphones that are out in each of the aisles to ask your own questions. And we'll also be using the Slido tool, and I hope that you've been able to register so that your comments can be recorded on Slido. But before I introduce each of the speakers and invite them to the podium, I just want to share one more look back at where we've come in the past several years. We've really accomplished as a community a lot since the last time this group had met. We've had the 2 millionth Argo float observation reported in. That would be an absolute physical impossibility if we were limited to just research vessels and the equipment that research vessels deploy. All the research vessels, all the tonnage in the world could not compile 2 million observations in the short time that Argo has been part of our backbone. We've also seen many other increases of coastal observing systems, deep Argo, biogeochemical Argo, which was just advanced and accepted by the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission a year ago, the incorporation of ocean observations into weather. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like your weather forecast, thank an oceanographer. If we look at deep ocean heat and the knowledge that's been revealed by the preliminary observations that are being made in ocean circulation, we now see more of that coming because we'll enhance the observing system for that purpose. We have new satellites, operational satellites, research satellites, and now the advent of microsatellites. They were not here really 10 years ago when the last time this meeting convened. What we understand of corals, the concern we have for the fishery populations dependent upon coral reefs, and plastics, as we heard earlier from the courageous sailors who have sailed around the entire ocean. We have an upcoming IPCC report on oceans and cryospheres. That will give us more indications, but it's based on your work. It's based on your observations. You are a very important community, and we look forward to your continued production of knowledge, wisdom, and direction that we might describe as a society. One last point I'll make is that we can describe in part through our observations what is really a shifting baseline in comparing the health of the ocean and the content of the ocean today as compared to some time past. But I ask the question, is that baseline we understand legitimate? We're chasing it as it's changing, and we really don't have, I think, that comprehensive baseline across the world's ocean. So maybe that can be an ambition we set as we move on in this discussion for how, with an enhanced ocean observing scheme globally, fit for purpose, and possibly being nested under the UN Decade of Ocean Science, that we'll be able to see how we can really establish a true baseline and measure as many things as we possibly can, if not everything that's in the ocean, and we can look at how that change takes place over time. Well, to further that discussion, I welcome our panelists, and I will just introduce them briefly, and then we'll go right down the table of succession. But first, we have on my right, your left, we have Bronte Tilbrook, who is from CSIRO in Australia, the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization. Next, we have Nelly Florida, who is the Deputy Director of Research and Development at BKMG from Indonesia, the Meteorology, Climatology, and Geophysical Agency. We have Sarah Perkey, who is an Assistant Professor of Climate at Scripps Institute of Oceanography. David Miller from Frugro, USA, and also bearing an important role in the IHO, or International Hydrographic Organization, General Bathymetric Chart JEBCO, as you're familiar. It's also a partner of the IOC, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission. And in naming the IOC, Vladimir Rybinin, who is the executive director of the IOC, and many of you know Vladimir also from his experience in WMO and major scientific contributions globally. So I would ask first that Bronte would take the floor and provide us with his remarks, and we'll just go in sequence with each speaker, and then we'll be pleased to undertake a conversation that you'll be participating in. Bronte, thank you.
Thanks, Craig. I've been really fortunate to be involved in two major observing systems for the ocean, in ocean carbon and ocean acidification. Ocean acidification is a much more recently developed observing system, and I wanted to go through some of the ways it's evolving. And first of all, it's widely recognised, we've heard in previous talks about its stress on marine ecosystems. It's resulted in a number of actions. In 2015, the United Nations identified it as one of 10 targets for the Sustainable Development Goal for the oceans. In just under a year ago, the World Meteorological Organization with GCOS accepted it as a headline climate indicator. And there are other intergovernmental organisations too that have already highlighted, that also highlighted its importance, including the Commonwealth Group of Nations, who have a blue charter, and they've required or suggested the establishment of ocean acidification action plans for the member nations. So there's widespread need at a high level to develop an observing system that can address issues that are identified in all these actions. And, not that one. I just want to go through how the ocean observing community for ocean acidification is evolving. Most of us are on the left side of this diagram, where members of observing systems, we're developing monitoring strategies and best practices, quality control procedures, and managing data and making it available. And this is where largely a lot of the OA, or ocean acidification community, is at present, located. And I wanted to highlight that it involves a number of partners, so research organisations, universities, and various programs. And there are three that I want to really mention: NOAA, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, and the International Atomic Energy Agency. Since in 2009 at Ocean Obs, there was a white paper calling for the establishment of a community for ocean acidification observing by Richard Feely, and that led in 2012 to those three organisations establishing a secretariat called the Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network, and that's the major coordination group for OA. But there are a number of other organisations listed here. I could have listed many more, there just wasn't room. The kind of work that's being done is that President is developing products like state of climate, state of environment reports for governments and industries so they can assess what's happening in their own environment and what they might do about it, information for modelling. Globally, there'll be a call for input to the Sustainable Development Goal 14.3 on ocean acidity, which in the near future. And I wanted to mention there's the carbon observing system is really critical for the ocean acidification monitoring, and there are two products in particular, the Surface Ocean Carbon Atlas, or SOCAT, and the Global Ocean Data Analysis product, GLODAP, that they're focused primarily on the open ocean, but they're critical for us to establish how ocean acidification is progressing in the open ocean. And there are other products that are going into, for example, the headline climate indicator for the World Meteorological Organization. Part of this conference is to move towards the right of this diagram and provide input to society and policy users. And I've mentioned some of them here. The variability we're starting to detect in ocean acidification is being used to develop action plans. So some state governments and some countries are developing ocean acidification action plans now. And globally, this work will feed into the Decade of Ocean Science and other initiatives, the Commonwealth Plan. It'll help small island developing states identify some of the stress of ocean acidification on their ecosystems. And I wanted to point out in the bottom, this is the key for all observing systems, is advocacy, communication and capacity building. So the carbon observing system, for very good reasons, is focused primarily offshore. Ocean acidification and its impact is going to be felt primarily by communities and governments in coastal and shelf waters. So GOON has tried to enhance the observing in the coastal region that matches the offshore observing. And many of the organisations listed in the bottom are key in this. And just as one example, in many regions, many coastal areas, there is no capacity to measure ocean acidification. And many of the organisations listed in that bottom panel have been developing capacity. And for example, in the last 4 or 5 years, there have been over 500 participants from developing countries, totally more than 50 developing countries involved in capacity building workshops and ongoing mentoring to help with building the observing system. There's still a lot of needs. There's huge gaps in the observing system, as most have. We need to continue to build capacity, and we need to start incorporating biological indicators into the observing system. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Bronte. I'd like to now invite Nellie to the floor and to provide us with her remarks. Thank you.
Aloha. Good morning. Selamat pagi in Indonesia. So I'm here on behalf of my Director General of Indonesia Meteorological, Climatological and Geophysical Agency, Professor Dwi Korita, who cannot able be here because of a very urgent national task. So she sent her very warm regards and her regret. And she do hope that we will have a very fruitful discussion along this week. So with the 17 hours time difference between Jakarta and Honolulu, wish me luck. So I will start my presentation. The title of the presentation is The Challenges and Innovation on Maritime Safety in Indonesia. I will start with the uniqueness of the Indonesia as an archipelagic country. So we have more than 17,000 islands, 6.5 million kilometers square of waters, and in which around 184 million people are living in a coastal area. So there are several key main gates in Indonesia seas which plays important roles of the global climate systems through the interconnected basins such as Indonesian through flow, South China Sea through flow. We also affected by the El Nino, La Nina, and MGO. And of course, Indonesia lies in a very active plate tectonic. So those natural complexities lead to unavoidable natural marine hazard, such as tsunami, extreme wave height, and also coastal Indonesian. So the diversities of Indonesia require more specific and rigorous effort in provision of timely early warning system to support maritime safety. So we have a target and innovation through these 5 years because we know that to improve our early warning system, we need sustained and expanded ocean observation. We also realize the fundamental aspect of observing system in long-term time series data, and we has lack long-term data since the observation in ocean especially still an obstacle due to the high overall cost from the development to maintenance. So we think that multidisciplinary system observation with international or regional platform could be delivering sustained observation, and collaboration and partnership across the scientific and end user community is a key to have a fully integrated and innovative ocean observing system. But at final stage, we need the end user engagement. We have a sample of activities that we think that it's really need right now, how we can improve ocean literacy. It is not just only talking about the engineering technology, but also the social innovation. So we need to integrate the local wisdom for self-awareness and preparedness. We learned a lot from the recent events of tsunami in Palu and Sunda Strait. It is not just need the innovation of technology, but we need to ensure that the information reaches the user through previous platform. So the integration of the local wisdom and the technology is a must. And of course, they also must to know the information, the ability to read the information that reaches the user community. I think that's my presentation. Mahalo, terima kasih, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nelly. Now we'd like to invite Sarah to provide her remarks. Thank you, Sarah.
So I was tasked to talk a little bit about the importance of in-situ temperature to our ocean observing system. And I think the main point that I want to emphasize here, and that is really important to communicate to the public, is that ocean warming really is global warming. And if we want to be able to accurately understand how the climate system is changing and how much heat is accumulating in the Earth system, we need to be able to know how the temperature of the ocean is changing. And so I like to start with the figure on the left here, which is from the last IPCC report, and it just really nicely shows this. So what's shown is the accumulation of energy in the total Earth system on the y-axis, and then time is on the bottom. And so there is representing the heat that's going into the ocean. And so if you want the total, which is the black line on the top, you really have to understand where that heat's going in the ocean. And so over 93% of that excess heat is going to the ocean. And the second point that is really nice in this figure is that when we talk about climate change, it's really just talking about that really small purple sliver at the bottom. And that's representing all of the heat that's going into the atmosphere that's driving the changes that we're seeing. And so if we don't understand how heat is going to the ocean and how that might change in the future, a very small change in the ocean heat content could have a very large effect on atmospheric warming. And then in the figure on the right is showing how we are getting at that number of what the total amount of heat is going into the ocean. And the figure on the bottom shows the colors, it's a little hard to see, but the colors on the bottom are showing the percentage of the global ocean that we think we're covering well to make an estimate of how the ocean temperature is changing. And so we have on the y-axis going from the surface down to 6,000 meters, and then time again going on the x-axis. And blue is showing less than 10%, saying we are only covering less than 10% of that region of the ocean with time. And red is showing where we are very well covered. So thinking about this in a historical context, if we look back to Ocean OBS 19, how do you advance. Oh, here we go, sorry. If we look at the colors on the bottom, at the surface, we were starting to get towards 60%, but in the deep ocean, we really didn't know very much at all as far as coverage. And the figures on the top are showing estimates of ocean heat content, again, going forward in time. And so the upper figure is upper 700 meters, and then the orange in the middle is 700 to 2,000, and the purple line in the bottom is below 2,000. And if you look at the top pre-1999, there are many different curves. These are representing different groups, and the color shading is the error bars, and you see there's quite a spread. And if you look to the left of that Ocean Obs 99 line, it wasn't even particularly clear. You're starting to see a warming trend, but it was very hard to tell exactly what that trend was. And then as you move forward into the next generations, you see on the right that those curves really squish down. All the estimates start to agree, and the bottom panel is showing that we're starting to get full ocean coverage. And really the reason for that is in the upper 2,000 meters was Argo. So this circle on the bottom shows we're starting to get towards 100% coverage from the Argo system, and then as a result, we can really see that climate change signal in it going forward in time. And just pointing out that, in the deep ocean, we still have very limited coverage even currently, but Deep Argo is on the horizon and hopefully coming into the future to help with that. And just as a final note, beyond just understanding the total ocean heat content, understanding where that heat is really important for society on all time scales. And so if we look on kind of decadal timescales, that ocean heat content is contributing to ocean sea level rise. On interannual to season timescales, it affects ENSO and these heat waves and things like the heat blob that happened in the Pacific. And then even on weather timescales, it goes into hurricanes and is affecting the number and intensity of hurricanes that we're seeing. And all of these things go into the headlines, and the public sees the results of that. So bigger surges, storm surges because of sea level rise, droughts and floodings because of ENSO, the effect of ocean heat on fisheries, and then also obviously the effect on hurricanes. And yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I'd now like to invite David Miller to the podium. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Craig, and good morning, everyone. It's often overlooked, but ocean mapping is critically important to ocean science. Bathymetry is one type of ocean observation, and ocean mapping is a component of an ocean observing system. Most of the world's oceans have yet to be mapped by direct measurement, and as a result, the global map is relatively inaccurate and has low resolution. Much of the bathymetry contained in the current JEBCO grid and in Google Earth is derived from bathymetry from satellite altimetry, which can have errors up to plus or minus a kilometer and has a resolution on the order of 5 kilometers. A high-resolution map of the world's oceans will empower the world to use the ocean sustainably, to make informed policy decisions, to manage resources, mitigate natural hazards, and to pursue scientific research. A comprehensive map of the ocean is extremely important to our understanding of ocean science and is a critical pillar of the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. This graphic here shows the bathymetric coverage that exists from direct measurement. Removing satellite altimetry, you can see that it's quite sparse. The Nippon Foundation JEBCO Seabed 2030 project was launched at the United Nations Ocean Conference in 2017. It is likely the vehicle that will ultimately take us to a comprehensive map of the world's oceans. Seabed 2030 is a collaborative project between the Nippon Foundation and JEBCO, and it's meant to inspire the complete mapping of the world's oceans by the year 2030 and to compile all bathymetric data into a freely available JEBCO ocean map. JEBCO works under the auspices of the IOC and the IHO, and its success of the Seabed 2030 project will depend on partnerships, collaboration, and coordination between government, academia, NGOs, and industry. Fugro is one of the early supporters of Seabed 2030 and has been participating in the project since before it was officially launched. We've successfully convinced some of our commercial clients to donate bathymetric data that we collected on their behalf to Seabed 2030, and we've initiated a crowdsourced bathymetry program whereby we're collecting bathymetry from our vessels as we transit from project to project and continent to continent. So far, we've contributed over 500,000 square kilometers of bathymetric data to Seabed 2030. Over 100 organizations, including others from the private sector, are now engaged and contributing to Seabed 2030 via the JEBCO grid. Since Seabed 2030 was initiated just over 2 years ago, global bathymetric coverage in the JEBCO grid has increased from 6 to 15%. Fugro initiated a crowdsourced bathymetry program almost 3 years ago on a single vessel. Once system and processes were developed so that we could remotely command and control the operation from various data centers without surveyors on board the ships, then we expanded that amongst the fleet. 7 vessels are currently now involved, and we ultimately hope to deploy this across our entire fleet of vessels. Other companies can do similar things, whether it's with bathymetry or other ocean observation data. In our case, because we're using multi-beam systems from survey vessels, we're also able to collect sound velocity information, seafloor backscatter, and water column sonar data. Furthermore, other oceanographic, meteorological, or environmental sensors could be installed on vessels involved in crowdsourcing programs, however. Imagine the possibilities if fleets of vessels around the world involved in fishing, commercial shipping, and cruising, and as we learned earlier, even ocean yachting, had crowdsourcing programs. Fugro hopes that our early participation in Seabed 2030 will inspire and motivate others in industry to collaborate in ocean mapping and observing initiatives. Both SDG 14 and the Decade will hopefully increase visibility on the critical importance of ocean mapping and observations to the conservation and sustainable development of our oceans. A trend that can leverage the opportunity is the increasing importance of sustainability and sustainable development to businesses, particularly publicly traded companies. It is increasingly common for publicly traded companies to have sustainability initiatives that relate directly to the UN Sustainable Development Goals and to report back to their shareholders on the contributions towards sustainable development. This is how we will build a safe and livable world. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Now, our final speaker in this suite of presentations before we open up the floor to comment and discussion will be Vladimir Rubinin, the Executive Director of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission. Vladimir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Aloha. So let me have my presentation, please. So, and in this very short presentation, I will try to convince you about one little thing. I think we can go and should go further in the detailization of the requirements that are needed to manage the ocean. Because Peter Thompson spoke in his video, and he actually alluded to a medical example. We now have a medical case. We have to do some curing, and indeed we have to elaborate some prescriptions for this. So, you know, I would like to state that indeed ocean observations, and Albert Fisher showed this in his presentation, were instrumental in convincing the governments, United Nations, that climate change is important, change in the ocean is important. And I think now it is important that all these areas of benefit that come from the Sustainable Development Goals also benefit the ocean observations, because this is a synergistic development. So I would like to state also that when we think about conventional climate change, there was a discussion about the hiatus around the time when the Paris conference was supposed to be taking place. It was the Argo buoys that actually untied this conundrum, and it was very instrumental in moving forward in the Paris Climate Agreement. And that was the time when ocean was for the first time included in the text of the Paris Accord on Climate. You know, also ocean is included, but not so strongly in the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. We really need to work with conventions and to convince them that ocean change is very important. And the World Ocean Assessment that was published in 2016 was very, I think, vocal in this case. I particularly am impressed with the one statement that is this comes from this assessment, that humankind is running out of time to start managing the ocean sustainably. So the question to us is, have we done all that is required to manage the ocean sustainably from the viewpoint of observations? So there are several ways of managing the ocean. This is coastal zone management. And in this particular case, we can also trace what is coming to the ocean from land. So this is also maritime special planning, and we aim now at having 30% of total area of exclusive economic zone covered by governmentally approved and science-based maritime special plan. This is also a huge support to blue economy and to turn it into sustainable blue economy. And this is also a means of organizing better the marine special planning. In Sustainable Development Target 14.5, there is a requirement that 10% of the world ocean area is covered by marine protected zones. I don't think we are getting there, but we are getting close to this number. And then let's think what is going to happen in fisheries. By 2020, we should have ended the overfishing, illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing. So we have to report this. This is happening. But you know, this is not really reflected in the plans of observations. So disaster risk reduction requires a lot of observations that comes from the ocean. I would like to quote Craig that said, thank the oceanographer when it comes to prediction of long-term events, but also some really devastating disasters that really the prediction of which depends on the ocean. Then adaptation, mitigation of climate change. Probably this is the most elaborated area in our requirements. But now we'll look how we manage the ocean. We also manage it through the idea of ocean ecosystems. A large marine ecosystems community is developing key performance indicators. They analyzed several sources of indicators and came up with around 100 indicators, and they were able to converge this to around 25 different indicators in 5 different domains. But you know, this is not really kind of cooperating with the ocean, essential ocean variables. So we have to do some homework there. So I think this reflects in the sustainability of observing networks. In the recent wonderful study by Eurogoose, it was clearly shown that only 28% of ocean observing networks are sustainable when it comes to a few years perspective, while in the meteorological world, it's almost 70%. So we have to change this, and how we can do this, I think we have to look at the value chain of oceanography. It comes from research and observations, then goes through the data, and then comes into real-time services, and also through delayed mode services like assessments. So every error, every block on this chain needs to be analyzed to be more convincing. And I think the framework for ocean observation started this in 2009. The strategy of Goose is also moving in that direction. And I think the Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development offers to us a chance and a platform to really elaborate all the links in this connection. And I think this conference has a fantastic chance to unite us all in engaging in a more detailed and more convincing case, creating convincing case for the governments to move forward on supporting ocean observations. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. Mahalo nui loa.
Thank you very much, Vladimir, and to also all of our speakers, each of our speakers. What I'd like to do now is to open the floor, and during the course of the morning, you have been enriched by many of the presentations, and both cultural and technical, and that fantastic visual that we had in the video. But as Albert Fisher and I were just preparing to come up and each offer our remarks, we reviewed the Ocean's 2009 inventory of speakers. And several of you are here today as well. And we also have many new contributors to the ocean observing community. I'm sure you have either a question or a comment that you might want to offer in contribution. So as any interested parties might make your way to the microphones, and we have them around the room, and we certainly invite you to come up and offer a comment or ask a question, I'm going to start with a round of questions and give you the opportunity to make your way to the microphones. I'll start first with an area, and I'm going to ask Sarah if she would care to answer. In looking at, as you had mentioned, deep ocean circulation, several speakers have mentioned how much heat is being absorbed by the ocean. But Sarah, how much do we know, how much do we not know? And as I looked at your graphic, there was a rather stark level of recording of deep ocean heat. And what will we learn from that once we do deploy Deep Argo? How far along are we on Deep Argo? And how does that compare to the conventional or core Argo system that we have? Please.
So to start, at best right now what we can do, what we know about the deep ocean from the past is really based on ship-based data. And the ships is from the Ghost Ship program that goes out decadally. So at best we can say it is warmer in this decade than it was the last decade. And now with the third set of occupations on Ghost Ship, we can say, okay, it's a little bit warmer in this area and a little bit less warm in this area. But that's not telling us anything about the interannual variability. And with Deep Argo, we will be able to much better resolve the way that Core Argo did the full global ocean and be able to look at that change from year to year and be able to better monitor and not have to wait 10 years to see how the deep ocean is changing. And I think it will also shed light on a number of processes that we don't know much about, similar to Core Argo in the surface area, in the surface ocean, and allow us to be able to understand the processes and see deep ocean circulation and see how that deep warming is getting into the deep ocean and let us put it in models better.
Sarah, thank you very much. I don't know about the other panelists, but if I could ask our sound engineer to just tweak up the wedge monitors up forward so the panelists might be able to hear the comments a bit more clearly, I would appreciate that. Thank you, sir. All right. Our first question comes from the floor. The gentleman in the center, please go ahead.
Hi. So generally, there seems to be a lack of opportunities or understanding about the effects of oceans on climate change, which one of the panelists had mentioned. And there's an actual need to increase that ability to communicate to the general public. We know amongst coastal communities, they see the effects firsthand, but there seems to be this lack of a link between what's happening in the ocean environment and what's happening with forest fires, droughts, and things like that. So in a community like this, where I know there's a lot of people here that are really heavily embedded into their science, what is something that we have to do differently to make the information that's coming out of the research more accessible to policymakers, to the general public, so that they can actually prioritize what's happening in the ocean sector?
Thank you for your question. I would invite any of the panelists who would like to address that. Would anyone like to take that up? Okay. Once again, if we can, just a little bit more on the monitors, please. It was difficult for the panelists to hear the question, and sir, if I could ask you to just distill and repeat in brief what your mainstream question is, then I think we could be able to enjoy the benefit of the panelists' remarks. Thank you.
So my question basically is, how do you communicate complex scientific research to make it more relatable to the general public, policymakers, and anybody else that is living on our planet?
Thank you. Thank you for the question, and also I think thank you for the balance on the sound. So how do we communicate effectively the complexities of what our science community might be learning to the lay public, who largely would be those decision makers who are going to make policy decisions. Would anyone like to take that question?
This will not be convincing probably, but I think this paradigm is changing, and more and more people know about problems in the ocean. And also scientists are more and more engaged in what we call the new societal contract of oceanography that came actually from climate sciences, when there was no decision taken in the United Nations Conference on Climate Change in Copenhagen in 2009. Climate scientists that delivered the whole sum of knowledge were actually in discussing why it was not happening. It was related to the issues of politics, of group interests, but we have to overcome that situation. And the idea of social contract for science was created. And I think now it applies to oceanography as well. So it is our job for all of us to communicate what we know, to attach the sense of urgency to what we know. And I think communication is also becoming a very important function of oceanography. So I hope very much that the decade of ocean science will be also a change in communication. And in addition to this, I would like to state that we have to really develop this set of requirements in the domains that are important for management. And as soon as we have this clarity on the requirements, then it will be easier to speak to the decision makers and stakeholders. Probably not enough, but this is a chicken and egg. The more we know, the more we're able to change the situation, the more loud will be our voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Vladimir. Anyone else like to respond? Yeah, Bronte?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's one of the main aims of this conference is to try and work out how to make that connection with policymakers and the communities in general. And, there are different aspects of the observing systems that are trying to do that through capacity building and educating people in countries that don't have an understanding or capacity of what might be changing in their environment. And one of the things that's happened since the last decade of the last Ocean Ops conference is there's a lot more awareness now that environmental change in the ocean is going to influence the health and sustainability of marine ecosystems. And that's really gaining the attention of a number of people. And I think all we can do is continue to give that message and provide information and data that shows what's happening in the environment. And policymakers will hopefully respond in the longer term. If you have any suggestions, please. It's a tough question.
Nellie, would you like to address that? Thank you.
Yeah, I want to add we have a program that we ensure that the local government or also the end user, for example, the fishermen, now the information that reaches them. For example, for the marine forecast, we don't think that they know already what is the color, the meaning of the color that we that we provide for them. In terms of we want to say that there will be extreme wave head in coming days for them. So we have the program that we call Fisherman Field School. So we with the local government and with the extension workers work with them in the simple language, and also sometimes we do with the local language, so they know what is the meaning of the information and what is the effect of the information to their daily life. For example, they don't know about the climate change, they don't know about ocean acidification, or maybe the ocean heat what is the effect of their for their life. So we need to increase the ocean literacy, but through the field school, through the training of trainers of the information.
Thank you. I see we have 3 folks over here, 2 folks over here, so I'm going to go with the heavily weighted side of the room and ask our next question. It looks like Billy. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. So I'm really following up on the previous question and trying to make it more specific. And that is that it's one thing to talk about influencing policymakers, but I think we're charged with something more than that, which is the user communities, the coastal communities. And in fact, many of our observations really have quite an indirect connection to that. And Sarah's discussion of the deep ocean, that we in this room all understand that very well, that has a tenuous, if any, connection to a coastal user. And making that connection and justifying those observations, which are very expensive, and we all do them, and we have a connection to policymakers, and that is through our program managers, through our agencies. We don't have a very good connection, at least for those of us who do mid-ocean work, to the coastal communities. It's not our expertise, and it's not something that's easy to do. So I guess my question as an ocean observer is, am I charged with making that connection myself? How do I do it? I know how to get to policymakers. I don't know how to get to coastal communities or to explain the importance of what I do. I mean, Craig got to it a little bit in saying, you know, if you like your weather forecast, thank an oceanographer. But getting more specific about how do I justify an observation way, way out in the Pacific, not near any coast, to somebody's daily life, that's a hard thing to do.
Thank you for that question. So to repeat for the panelists in the event that it was not clear, I think the question really is, how do we reach the coastal constituencies? And I would at least like to offer one observation, which is that I ask you not to forget that there is a rich coastal observing community in the United States, in many other attributes. I know in the United States we have the Integrated Ocean Observing System, and that program is celebrating their 20-year anniversary during the course of this week. So the deep ocean has to bridge with the coastal ocean, and maybe that question is how we could take this, and thereby how do we communicate what might be the deep ocean, or to the lay citizen, the more obscure measurements that we're making, how do we tie that back to the coastal community for their awareness? Not forgetting that we have a rigorous, engaged coastal observing community as well. So maybe we have a problem in our community of connecting the deep ocean with the coastal. Responses, please.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and beyond the coastal community, it's really society in general, because the example that Craig gave, which if you like your 10-day forecast or your 7-day forecast, thank an oceanographer, I mean, that is weather forecasts everywhere, not just in the coastal communities. But creating those relationships and showing other examples, I think, is going to be critically important. Another example could be, if you like your Netflix, thank the submarine cable industry. I mean, 99% of the world's communications now, from continent to continent, is sitting on the bottom of the seafloor. And food on your table, energy in your home, cooling in your home. I mean, all of these items have direct impacts on society and humanity. So we have to make very discrete connections to our ocean observations, to ocean science that lead to those connections that they live, feel, and experience every day.
Thank you, David. Unless anyone really feels compelled to further that conversation, I'll move to the next question. Right, thank you. I'm going to come over to this side. Sir, the floor is yours. Ask your question, please.
Thanks. I think historically, over 50% of atmospheric CO2 has historically come from wealthy nations, smaller part of the planet, in the Northern Hemisphere particularly. Yet, these are the wealthiest nations that have perhaps the most resources to address global warming. UN has recognized this sort of historical imbalance in many ways. So this is a follow-up on the other question, which is with respect to coastal observing. Clearly, wealthier nations have been able to invest more in capacity than other nations. How do we see, addressing this from the point of view of ocean observing?
Thank you for the question, sir. While you're at the microphone, forgive me to the earlier speakers. I know we had one gentleman from the indigenous community, and I believe that was Billy Kessler from NOAA on the previous question. Could you just identify yourself so that our community can engage in follow-up when we're with you in the other sessions?
Sure. My name's Eric Ream from Université Laval. We study Arctic ecosystems.
Thank you very much. Would anyone care to address that question? Okay. I think we're still having a little bit of that difficulty of the sound in the room. If you could just do another distillation of your question, sir, please. I'm sorry.
Sure. Briefly, I think there's a parallel between the historical responsibility of wealthier nations who've contributed, at least 50% of the volumetric CO2 to similar to coastal observing. Wealthier nations have more capacity than less wealthy nations. How do we plan to address this with ocean observing in the coming decade? Because clearly there's lots of the world's coastlines that aren't adequately observed.
Thank you, sir. Yes, looking at the economic disparity between nations that might have more or fewer resources for ocean and coastal observing, how do we close that gap? Vladimir.
Thank you very much, Craig, and I will try. In principle, I think when it comes to discussions in the domain of climate change, and you alluded to the carbon emissions. When it comes to discussions about biodiversity being areas of national jurisdiction, so there is a question how developed and developing countries can find common platform. So our answer to this is, first of all, of course, capacity development. So we really need to invest into this, and this is one of the areas that we propose to be for development during the decade of ocean science. There is in all these negotiations a principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, and indeed I think it is possible to, and this also actually refers to the previous question, to organize the data processing and observations in such a way that there is a downscaling of information from global to regional to local. So, and that information will be serving local communities and engaging them in more efficient ways of using the ocean. We have already coastal zone management principles, we have maritime special planning, and we would like to expand it to the whole world. So this is actually a big change in how we manage the ocean, because we know how, for example, cities are managed. We know where are the supply chains, where the wastewater treatment facilities. So the same thing is now happening in the ocean. Ocean is now used so intensively. So we need to turn to a global system for management of the ocean. And coastal zone is one of the key approaches in doing this. So my impression is that the global ocean observation community should turn into local observation community as well, on the basis of also differentiation of responsibilities. So we have a flow of information. This is how meteorological predictions are done, from global to downscale predictions in the regional domain, and then to local predictions. So I think there is a possibility of organizing a data processing in oceanography to turn it into real service to humanity if you have this system of agreements, system of data processing and observations that will open the data for the whole world, and then it will engage local communities. And then it will help to untie the issues that relate to exchange of coastal data, because historically it was possible to exchange global data, and much less progress has been achieved in exchanging of coastal data. But in engaging economical interests, and also economic interest, and also creating a system that, for example, Copernicus is developing through a data simulation system, through reanalysis of ocean data, and then to predictions, it should be possible to at least increase the use of the data, and this may change the paradigm. Thank you.
Vladimir, thank you. I do want to, I'll give Bronte a chance to offer another comment very quickly, but I do want to also go to the Slido questions because I know there's been a lot of activity on that tool. Bronte, did you have a contribution?
I can only give you one example from ocean acidification community. There's been a really large effort to educate and train people in ocean acidification monitoring in coastal areas. Like I mentioned before, 500 participants from developing countries, and that includes working with I had a large list of groups that are involved in this observing system, and the point I forgot to make was that they all work together extremely effectively to deliver on the observing system. And in terms of capacity building, there's a lot of volunteers that put in time, along with other groups including IOC and the Ocean Foundation and International Atomic Energy Agency, to deliver training programs for scientists, early career researchers and policymakers in developing countries to build the observing network. And we're already starting to see that. In the next, I think the next session, there's a talk from OA Africa where this kind of effort's been applied successfully and it's led to increased observing. So it requires volunteers and commitment by the people involved in the observing system, but that's going to be the case for everyone, I think.
Thank you, Bronte. If I look at the Slido questions here, these first three, or these top three, seem to have a general consensus theme, but I'm going to pick out the one element that might be unique. How do we build an Argo-like global coastal applied around the world? What are the thoughts of the panel on how we build a global coastal observing system analogous to the Argo system as a universal open ocean system? Any ideas? Go ahead, please, sir.
Well, I think that's going to be it's an important question, but it's a really hard question. Argo was built and inspired by kind of one question, which was closing the steric sea level budget in the open ocean. And it had one question, and therefore you could build this observing system to really successfully answer that question. And so I think the question for the coastal system is what scientific questions do we need to know, and then thinking about the platform of how we build that. And that will be a more challenging problem, but a good problem to address in the next 10 years.
Thank you for that answer. Any further thoughts on that question? Bronte?
There's already a lot of infrastructure in coastal regions. They're not doing integrated observations. They might be focused on one aspect or another. So there's an opportunity to build the range of observations that are made. There's also a lot of new technology coming on. Sail drones, for example, I think have an exhibit here, which are able to make a whole suite of measurements in the coastal regions and offshore. There's new sensor technologies that need to be tested well, but we're seeing some dramatic advances in the last 10 years that are really going to bring down the cost of making the observations and the ability to deploy for long time periods in many more areas than we have in the past.
Thank you. I'm looking at about 10 minutes left here. If I could go back to the Slido questions, I think some of these questions are the nature of why we're here, and I think they're going to be answered during the course of the week, but certainly ask you to focus on them. How are we going to build this global ocean observing system more enhanced than the one we have today? I'm going to ask, as you look at the way that our week is set up, to recognize how today is scene setting, and we have some information gathering over each of the successive days, and then on Friday is the wrap-up, the roll-up, the takeaways. And hopefully during the course of each of the sessions this week, we're going to be getting towards the answer to some of these three questions. Now, in deference to the legs belonging to the individuals who have been standing, I do want to get to them and allow them to ask their questions as well. But I think these are thought-provoking questions, these top ones that appear here from Slido. So let me go over here on my right and, sir, ask you to identify yourself and ask your question.
Hello. Oh. Okay. Hi, aloha mai. Melina mai kako. My name is Kamea Loa. I come from the island of Kauai, in a place called Anahola. I am a teacher of some aspects of traditional knowledge, and I observe, or I kilo, imiike, I observe at 2 beaches. One beach called Wailua, where I observe at a sacred site called Hikinakala, and the second is at a place in Hanalei called Opukahi. Opukahi is a mulibai, or is the river mouth, and those are the 2 places where I do most of my observations. My comment and my humble request is this. I'm looking at issues of equity, and what I don't see on the stage is an indigenous person who might be able to give an indigenous perspective of ocean observation. It would be nice as we talk about all of these issues of global warming and climate change to see exactly what's going on in our indigenous communities and how they're addressing and how their legacies and how their histories have come to inform them about these issues. The number 2 thing that I wanted to say, and this is a shout out or humble request to my esteemed Western science colleagues. Do you know who your native peoples are in your area? Do you know who your elders are in your area? You might consider, as we speak about all these issues about the ocean, to get to know the native peoples in your area. If we're talking about building relationships and communities, we're talking about people who have lived and have a legacy of living in these coastal areas for thousands of years. I'm sure they have some important knowledge and important wisdom to share with all of you. So I humbly ask that you, today in the 2 front rows over here, we have a number of people representing their respective Native communities. I'll get to know them, and throughout the week you'll have opportunities to see, interact, and then also talk with some. So please take the time to do that, not just here, but when you go back to your respective communities, countries, so on and so forth. The third thing I was going to say is kapilina. Kapilina means to build a relationship. The gentleman earlier talked about how do we reach people. Hawaiian people, Kanaka Maoli, Utsai people, we believe that we are related to all phenomena, all natural phenomena, and we build our understanding of this world to explaining, honoring, and practicing that relationship every day. Yeah. So if you're looking for a strategy by which you can build opportunity to work with different communities, it might start with how you and we and all of us are related to all things around us. So those are the 3 comments that I have.
Thank you, sir.
Mahalo.
Thank you very much. I'd like to give the panelists an opportunity to respond. I think probably the most pointed and focused question would be in looking at how we bring indigenous peoples' observations into a comprehensive global observing system and not turn our backs, perhaps, sir, on the cultural aspects and the historic aspects of our marine space throughout the world.
Consider putting when you do your curriculum or whenever you do a proposal, whatever, consider putting a traditional knowledge component to that.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Comments from the panel, please.
The question? Sorry.
Nelly?
Thank you very much. I think we have similar experience in Indonesia because many of our fishermen is a very, very traditional one. So in Indonesia, fishermen loves to listen to the radio. So we communicate our information through the radio with the local language, and also we want them. And sometimes they, not sometimes, that they found that our information, especially our weather and maritime weather forecast, is very, very good. And sometimes they just say that maybe the weather forecaster is God. That they know about the weather in advance. So. And because of that, because of their experience, so they want to know, want to help us to do the observation also, because they know the use of the observation for their daily life. Not do the observation, but I think it's like to report the weather that they face in the sea. So we can use the information to validate our model. So it's the example, the simple example in Indonesia.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at the time and I'm realizing that we can do a quick burst, particularly for this gentleman who has been standing here the whole time. Short question and short answer from a panelist. Go ahead, please.
Okay, super quick. My name's Matt Fouch. I'm a geophysicist with Samara Data. Thinking about OceanObs 29, 10 years from now, what's a key observation that we can't make today that we should see reports on in 10 years?
Very good question. Anyone care to answer that? What's the observation we're going to be proud of in 2029 that we can't make today? Any ideas? Vladimir.
You know, my impression, thank you very much for this wonderful question. You know, it's actually a very good one. I would like to state that what is happening now, I think, is it shows to us there is some convergence of interest towards coastal observations, which reflects actually the topic of this conference, work with users and the communities. So my impression is that in 2029, when we'll be approaching already the concluding year of the decade of ocean science, one parameter that will be very interesting to observe would be how open will be observations for people. Whether we will create or not a data system that really protects the ocean, will we be able to create a set of data that governs the actions in the ocean, so the health of the state of the state of the ocean health is improving. So I think there is a sense of doing this in looking at the large marine ecosystems parameters and start producing observations that feed into actions to protect the health of the ocean. We can have several roadmaps in the decade of ocean science. One of them will be that roadmap, that's how science and observations can really cure the ocean health from different viewpoints. I think this will be probably one of the successes in OceanObs 2029.
Vladimir, thank you. I'm going to apologize in advance to those of you who remain standing. And while I try to be a courageous individual, there's a guy next to me with a paddle. I'm paying a lot of attention to him. Everyone has been very timely with their comments, questions, remarks. I want to thank the panelists. Please remember, perhaps in summation, what we've heard here. Realizing that we've heard from ocean observing leaders in countries like Australia and others, that we've heard from Indonesia and the perspective of a country with many complicated and complex challenges, also a very important part of the world when it comes to global ocean circulation. We've heard from the commercial sector and the interest in the views, as well as a representative from Mapping the World's Oceans and the JEBCO Seabed 2030 program, and then also from the roles that several people on this panel have played in international organizations and what those roles are. I think some of the issues we take away with us is how we communicate better to the public, how we can look at bridging the open ocean and deep ocean observations with the coastal community, which is where people live and where some of these challenges come into confluence and focus. We looked at economic disparity and how we might bridge the gap so that countries that might not have the same GDP could be equal contributors and importantly recognized as observers, as well as indigenous communities as well. And then how might we, during the course of this week, come to understand how we will prioritize the attributes of that which we need to observe in the ocean. My recommendation is list them all and figure out how we build and phase them in and build it fit for purpose, but that purpose definition may change over time and we need to be flexible and bring these out slowly. So please help me thank David Miller, Sarah Perkey, Bronte Tilbrook, Nellie Florida, and Vladimir Rubinin for their contributions to this panel. Thank you all. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you to the panel. This is the universal symbol of your time is up, or it's time to get into the meeting room. So please please, we're trying to be respectful of all the panelists, but also of you. You have networking time at lunch, at poster sessions, and so on. So we want to run this show on time. So try and know when the paddle is appearing that you need to wrap. You're all going to be excused now for lunch, and you need to return at 1:30 p.m. We have two wonderful panels on concepts shaping the future of ocean observing and the successes and opportunities for ocean observing. Great lineup of speakers. Not to be missed this afternoon is a very special 2-hour session from our indigenous communities and a reception in the roof garden, which is not to be missed. So that's at 6 p.m. Remember, every day here at 8 o'clock for exhibits and 8:30 start in the plenary room. Thank you very much. See you this afternoon.